everybody, and welcome to my February wrap up. This is a little bit later, and I don't know, I feel like I can hear a little bit more of an echo. So I recently changed around this room, and where I used to have two bookshelves behind me and two on the other side of the room, I moved them all behind because I'm hoping to get like a sofa or something to put in here so that I can actually read in this room. And if in fact this is much echoier than normal, I'm going to have to find some sort of solution for that. So please excuse the more echoey audio. But I am really excited to talk about my February wrap up because I actually ended up reading a lot of books that I really liked in February. January, as I talked about, was a little bit of a struggle in terms of just having so many things that I had agreed to read. And even though I had a lot of buddy reads for February, I did end up enjoying a lot of what I read. And I put in books that were not on the TBR, and I felt really good about everything that I was reading. Just in terms of a star roundup, I read 9 books in the month of February, and 2 of those were 3-star. 2 of them were 3.5 stars, 2 of them were 4 stars, and 3 of them were 5 stars. So I had more 5-star reads than any other kind this month. And I would like the record to show that because Kyle, who is in my Discord, tells me that I don't give 5 stars to anything because I am a contrarian. And that's not true. I have more 5-star reviews than anything else this month. So I am really happy with that. Like I said, enjoyed all the things I was reading. I'm going to continue to use my reading journal to go through my reads of the month because it helps me stay organized and make sure that I talk about everything. So I'm just going to go through things in order of which I read them. And the first book of the month that I read was An Autumn War by Daniel Abraham. And this is one of the books that I gave 5 stars to. I don't want to give too many of my thoughts away because we are going to do a live show for this book. Hopefully sooner rather than later. There's been a little bit of difficulty with scheduling when you have such a big group. That can sometimes be an issue, but I don't want to leave anybody out because everybody has such awesome, valuable things to say. But this has been my favorite of the quartet so far. I am really looking forward to see how everything wraps up. And what I really enjoyed about An Autumn War, beyond the fact that I thought, at least for me, it felt like the most rewarding read. There were so many threads that had started in book 1 that came to fruition in book 3, or there are so many character moments where you can kind of look back on the characters from book 1 and think, wow, I can really see how Abraham built this character up, and I think that that is absolutely what they would do in this situation. And even if it is heartbreaking, even if you feel like it is the wrong decision, it feels very true to their characters. So I think that book 3 of the Long Price Quartet is just a further reflection of the type of author that Daniel Abraham is, and it just further cements him as an author of, for whom I am going to want to read all of their backlisted books. So really had a great time with Autumn War, but I will save more of my thoughts for when we get together to do that live show. The second book of the month for me was Blood Song. So this was our channel read along for February, and it was one of the books that was on my 5-star predictions list. If you watched that video at the beginning of the year, or maybe the end of last year. No, I think I made it at the beginning of 2021. But regardless, if you watch that, I talked about Blood Song and how I thought it was a shoe-in for a 5-star because Blood Song, if you haven't heard of it, it's a story that uses like very classic fantasy tropes, but feels modern in terms of execution. And it follows a man named Valen El Sorna who's telling the story of his life. So some events have taken place in the past, and he is in a position to relay the story of his life to a historian who wants to make note of it. And I love that setup. I love it in the Kingkiller Chronicles. I just love it in general. I really enjoy unreliable narrators. So always trying to parse out what is true versus, how this person sees themselves reflect what kind of story they're telling. And I love classic fantasy tropes. So it had so many of the things that I enjoyed. It is a coming of age story. But in the end, I gave this book 3.5 stars. There was nothing bad about it. I thought that the writing was very clean. I thought that it was the type of writing that really just serves as the perfect tableau for your story. It did not do anything to wow me, but it did not do anything to pull me out of the narrative either. I did a full review of Blood Song to kind of list all of the things that I liked or didn't like, But all I will say in terms of wrap-up purposes is that I did really enjoy it. I wonder if it was just a victim of its hype, like if people had not repeatedly said that it was one of their favorite books. If I hadn't hyped myself up to read it, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. And I do think that I will at least try to read the other books in the series, but they will certainly not be a priority. I don't even know if I will get to them this year. But I think that if you are in the mood for something that feels just like cozy classic fantasy, not to say that there aren't brutal things that happen in this book, because there are. Don't go in expecting like not the Ocean at the End of Lane, the House on the Cerulean Sea. Like, don't go in expecting like a warm, fuzzy time, but just cozy in that it felt very familiar in terms of tropes and execution. So if you're looking for something that feels, bread and butter classic fantasy, then definitely give it a try. The third book of the month for me, and my second 5-star of the month, was Cold Days. So this was my Dresden read for the month. It's the only Dresden Files book that I read in February, and it was so good. It's the second of the Dresden Files that I have given 5 stars to, and I enjoyed it so much. I can't talk about it because anything that I say would be spoilery. I did do a full review video for this as well, just like a total gushing review with also some of my thoughts and predictions for what's going to happen later in the series. But Dresden, for me, at the risk of sounding like a broken record for all of the people who have come before me, it really is a series that keeps improving with time. Each book seems to be better than the last, and I just am very impressed at how Jim Butcher took a series that I thought was like a fine time. It was fun. I was happy enough to read them, once a month or once every couple of months, and turned it into this epic fantasy story that I am totally and completely enthralled by. I am starting a new Dresden book in a couple of days, and I'm really, really excited for it. Though I have some misgivings too, because now I'm so close to the end. Soon I will be with everybody else and I'll have nothing new to read, and it's gonna be so sad. It's gonna be very tough to not have a new Dresden book to reach for. Similarly, I gave my dad the first 5 Dresden books for his birthday, which is January the 5th, and he is now at number 10. So he is also really enjoying Dresden, and he is catching up to me. So I would imagine that with my other books that I'm reading, he's just reading Dresden straight through, so he will probably catch up to me as well, and we'll probably end up finishing around the same time. The next book, number 4, was a 4-star read, and that was Gardens of the Moon. So for anybody who has been following along since January, I actually started Gardens of the Moon in January, and then with the really busy month that it ended up being, I had to read it very, very slowly. I probably took a couple of weeks where I didn't read any, but I did finish it in February, and I really liked it. I would still like to do a review for this, but because of just busy life and busy work schedule, I haven't actually had a lot of time to film. But I'm hopeful that maybe this weekend I'll be able to film a review for Gardens of the Moon, because I'd like to talk about the experience of reading it, because I don't think for a series like Malazan that there can be too many videos encouraging people to read it, or maybe trying to address some of the worries that you might have before you go into the series. But I will just say that this feels both familiar, because clearly Steven Erikson is a fan of fantasy, and there are a lot of elements that he draws from to create his story, but also it feels very fresh and unique in that, in terms of perspective, it's very different from other fantasy that I have read. I really like the juxtaposition of the very intimate moments that you get from certain characters contrasted with this very zoomed out view of a world in turmoil. So we get this kind of bird's eye view of the Malazan Empire, but within that we get to see, as I said, these very intimate details of a variety of characters' lives. I thought it was really interesting. It would be impossible to give a proper rundown of a book like this in a wrap-up, so I will just say that some of the misgivings that I had were unfounded. It was easier in some ways than I was expecting, and appropriately complex in others, and I'm really looking forward to book 2. My goal for the year is probably going to be to try to read one of these books every 2 months, just because I have other big series like the Realm of the Elderlings that I have on hold that I haven't been able to read at the pace I want. So I just don't think it's realistic for me to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to read one a month, because that's probably not going to happen. And I don't want to end up DNFing or feeling like I am obligated to read these series. But for anybody who might be interested in my thoughts on Malazan, I really liked it. I am going to try to record a review, and I'm looking forward to reading more. Number 5 for the month was one of the kind of surprise books that snuck in. So there were a couple of girls on the Discord who wanted to read this and asked me if I would like to join in, because they knew that my sister had been trying to get me to read this book, and so I did. And that book is called Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. And I gave this book 3 stars. This is a really interesting story. So this is a book that my youngest sister is obsessed with and has been for years. So this started off as a web novel in China by an anonymous Chinese author, and was then, I think, fan translated online. It became this huge sensation. There is a Chinese drama called The Untamed that is based on the book that you can watch on Netflix. There's a donghua, or a Chinese animation that is, I know you can watch it on YouTube. That's probably not like the most kosher, but I don't know where else to watch it, and that's where I have been watching it. But that is available on YouTube. There is, I believe, I'm trying to remember if there's an illustrated version. I'm not 100% sure, but there are now official printings of the book. And so the first volume, I believe there's going to be 4 or 5 in total, but it seems like a lot of them are coming out in quick succession this year. But they are being published. I think this one came out right at the end of 2021. And then the next ones are going to come out throughout the year this year. And so it was really short, and I thought, okay, well, I will pick it up, because I was looking for something light, something that was a little bit romance heavy after the like really dense books that I had been reading. And I was like, yeah, I will definitely pick that up. And I enjoyed it. I read the book, and then because I am me, I immediately went and read the entire translated work online. I will buy all of the copies, so I feel like I am still going to be supporting this company. So I didn't feel too bad reading the fan translation. I don't ever pirate books, which is not in any way a like a judgment on anybody who does. I'm just in a position to be able to buy them, for which I am very grateful. And so I do buy all of the books that I read, but I did read the rest of this one online because I could not wait. I read this printed copy, and then I went and read the entire rest of the thing online over the next 2 days. And it was a trip. I really like the story. So the story of this book, Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, it follows a bunch of different cultivation sects. So basically, this takes place in a world that is based on medieval China. There is the use of cultivation magic, which is essentially magic that will help you fight spirits or demons. And one of our main characters has followed a dark path and has followed the path to demonic cultivation. So he is using these cultivation powers in ways that other people have not used them in the past. And everybody basically in the world believes that this means that he is now evil. So at the beginning of the book, and this is not a spoiler because it has happened like pre-book, he has been killed and his memory is kind of like scorched from the earth. And through a series of circumstances, his spirit is called back and he is resurrected, I guess. Not re-resurrected. Resurrected starts with an R-E for a reason. He is resurrected and now has to kind of have his second chance at life. And he starts to encounter people from his previous life. And at the core of all this, there is a fantasy romance. So I really liked it. There was a lot of things that really appeal to me. So I really like, when I read romance, like I like the angsty, like emotional romance that's going to cause you a lot of pain. That's just what I like to read. Some people don't like that. This is very over the top. There's a lot of like really high emotions going on. What I struggled with a little bit more was the writing. And I don't think that this is entirely a translation issue. I don't have huge problems with the translation, though I don't have a lot of experience reading Chinese translated works. I have read a few, but I don't think that it was necessarily the translation. If I am correct, and if anybody is a big fan of this series, then you can please let me know if this is not right. But it seems that this was published anonymously online. I don't think there was like a formal publishing house or a formal editor or anybody involved. So I just think that there were authorial choices where certain things were really explored in great depth, other events were kind of glossed over. The author presumes that you have a background in certain bits of information, but then will really explain other parts of the text. And I just found that style to be a little bit jarring. It all comes together, and I didn't ever feel confused when I read it, but it was just not a writing style that really flowed perfectly for me. But I still enjoyed it. I thought that it was a really fun story. Obviously, I went out and read the whole thing afterwards, so I needed to know what happened. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of them being published. The publishing company did a really good job with these. So if you like fantasy romance, if you like that subgenre of fantasy, I would really recommend picking up the printed versions because they're really pretty. I wish I had taken mine down, but I'll pop a picture up. I mean, I pop a picture up of all of them, but there's a picture there. But there's also internal artwork. The binding is really solid. They feel like really high quality manga almost, but not with, like, the paper feels like even higher quality than the kind of newspapery paper that you get in manga. But it's just, they're beautiful books. I'm really looking forward to having all of them, and I'm really happy to have them on my shelves. So my sister's been trying to get me to read this online for years, and so now I have finally read it. So you're welcome, Catherine, if you are watching this video. Number 6 was a book that I finished with my daughter, Juliet, and that is Strange Worlds Travel Agency. So this is a middle grade book. I gave this one 3 stars, and this is definitely a middle grade book that she ended up liking a lot more than I did. So I would say that if she was here, she would definitely say that this was a 5-star book for her, as far as she can understand what that means. But basically, she finished it, she loved it, she immediately asked to get book 2 for her birthday, which is coming up soon. So to me, that means that she really fell in love with it, and I'm really glad that she liked it. I had a couple of qualms with it. The basic premise of this book is there's a young girl named Flick who has recently moved with her family, and when she's out exploring her new town, she stumbles across a travel agency. And when she goes inside, she discovers that there is magic in the world. She is able, through the use of a magnifying glass, to see the kind of flecks of magic that are in the air, which reminded me a little bit of like the dust in His Dark Materials, which was cool. And they use this magic to open up what they call, oh gosh, what do they call them? Schisms in the universe. And through using these schisms, they can travel from world to world. And they have installed a miniature schism inside a bunch of different suitcases. And then they use those suitcases to world hop and explore. So this book is basically about figuring out what that magic system looks like. There's a lot of really cool sequences where they go to fun worlds that were super appealing to Juliet when she was reading it. She loved hearing all the details. She's a big fan so far of Portal fantasy in terms of what she has actually read. She's a huge Chronicles of Narnia fan. So she really likes that setup. And so that appealed to her sense of imagination, I think. And then there's also an underlying mystery where the kind of secondary main character, his father, is missing. And so they have to try to solve the mystery of what happened to his dad. The things that didn't quite work for me, I felt like the main character, Flick, is 12, and the other main character, his name is Jonathan, and he's 18. And they have this friendship, and there's nothing like untoward or creepy about the friendship. Like, I don't mean it in that way, but it's just odd that in a middle grade book, your 2 main characters are a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old, and they're having these really complex interactions and getting upset with each other and like building a friendship. And it just seems a little strange. Like, she is definitely a young 12 and he is an 18-year-old adult with responsibilities. So I just found it a little bit odd that in a middle grade book, that was the setup. I would have, I think, enjoyed it more, probably could have gotten captured in like the magic and the building of that friendship a little bit more if they had been closer to the same age. And they did not have like a mentor-mentee type of relationship. Like, this was very much a friendship with the kind of growing pains that comes with that. So it was just a little bit strange in that way. But otherwise, like a fun story, good imagination. Like I said, Juliet really liked it. I don't think she even probably recognized that the character was 18. Yeah, I think they both just seemed like kids to her when she read through. But she really liked it, and she is very much looking forward to reading book 2. Number 7 on the list was also a 4-star read, and this one was a manga. So I read the first volume of 20th Century Boys. Patrick and I are going to be doing a discussion for this manga. We had wanted to do some videos together, and he had suggested this one to me because he felt like, as a Stephen King fan, I would really like 20th Century Boys. I am going to talk about almost nothing because I want to save most of the things for our conversation. I gave it 4 stars, so clearly I like it. For anybody who wants to get into manga or, start reading something and is thinking like, what can I read that might match up with some of the other things that I like? This is a really interesting coming of age story that combines kind of a coming of age, sci-fi, like a really tense mystery. Like all of those elements are entwined to create this story, and I really like where it is going. It's very interesting to me so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing where else it goes. But that's all I will say about that one. Number 8 was Boy's Life. So this was my other 5-star read for the month, and definitely the contender for book of the month. Like between Cold Days and Boy's Life, I'd say they probably end up tying for my favorite read of the month. Boy's Life is a book that I picked up because I think it was when Brian Lee Durfee was on Mike's channel talking about Stephen King, and he mentioned this as one of his favorite books and kind of compared it favorably to Stephen King's coming of age tales, and that was so spot on. I loved this book. It was so good. I read it with Baron over at Your Brain on Books and Penny in his Discord, and it was fantastic. It was so enjoyable. It follows a young boy who grows up in a town called Zephyr, Alabama. And it takes place over time in a series of vignettes. I'm trying to remember if it takes place over a year. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I think at the beginning of the story, it is just before summer vacation. I'm trying to remember if they make it to the next summer vacation. I don't remember. It's irrelevant how much time passes, but it's like a short snapshot in his kind of late pubescent, like right before he is going into adolescence, kind of like right at the cusp of that pre-adolescent to adolescent period. And it melds together a coming of age story. It talks about just the way of life, the prevailing attitudes. It tackles topics like racism in the South and classism and the nature of humanity and if we really know the people around us. And the writing was surprisingly beautiful. It actually felt like a mashup to me of a coming of age Stephen King novel, like oh gosh, now I'm forgetting the name of the short story. This always happens. The Body? Is that the movie is Stand By Me? The story is The Body, I think. I don't know. Fake Stephen King fan, as I have said in many books, but regardless, it's kind of like his coming of age style meshed with some of the themes and kind of the whimsical or lyrical writing that you find in The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I love both of those things, and I loved this book. For a lot of it, I was like, okay, this will probably be like a 4.5-star read. And then as I got to the second half, there were multiple passages that made me cry. And not cry because of any like brutal character death or anything like that. It was just things about life. He captured the essence of that kind of fleeting time at that kind of golden window of your life before you move forward into adulthood. Some of the things that you gain, some of the things that you lose. He wrote about them with the most beautiful simplicity, and I just loved it so much. If you are looking for just an all-around general read, if you want to get out of like epic fantasy for one book, if you want to throw something onto your TBR that will shake it up a little bit in that way, I could not recommend this highly enough. It was so enjoyable. And if anybody else has read it, I would love to hear about it. We'll most definitely read more of his work moving forward. So was really happy that I finally picked that one up. And then my last read for the month was The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. So I just finished that one up on the last day of February, and I gave that one a 3.5 stars. This is a YA fantasy novel. It is a new release, and it is a kind of melding of, I believe it is Korean folklore, and I think also heavily inspired by Spirited Away, the animated film. And it follows a young girl who she lives in a village where they sacrifice brides to the sea god. Their village has been overtaken by storms. There's been 100 years of violent storms since the sea god lost his best friend. And to try to appease him, they have a legend that states that when he meets his true bride, these storms will stop and everyone will be safe. So there's a young girl who lives in the village. Her name is Mina. And her brother's true love is chosen as a bride for the sea god. And she knows that this is going to break her brother's heart. She loves her brother. So when her brother's fiance or partner is taken to be cast out into the ocean, she actually tags along and she throws herself into the sea at the last minute. And so she sacrifices herself to become the bride of the sea god. And then she falls beneath the sea, and we follow her story as she is under the sea and is trying to solve the mystery of the sea god, why the sea god is upset, and also find her place in the universe. It explores a lot of things about the nature of free will, about choice, about destiny, who we choose to love and how we choose to love them and what that means. And it's really, really beautiful. It's about being in control of your own fate. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 3.5 stars because I honestly think that it could have been longer. It's around probably like 350 pages, but like very wide set pages. And there were it had such a beautiful structure and such a beautiful foundation that I just found myself wanting more. Things progressed really quickly, especially in terms of romance, which is usually fine in a fairy tale type story because the fairy tale, it's about the message, it's about the allegory, it's about that and not necessarily about building up those character relationships. But I just think that I would have cared even more if there was a little bit more put into the characters and a little bit more building of their relationships. As it stands, it was still a really pretty book. I think it skews toward the earlier side of YA, and was just very sweet. I really liked the writing. I would definitely, when I'm looking for something soothing, I will definitely look for more of this author's work because I really enjoyed reading it. And that's it. Those are the 9 books that I read in February. So just to review my reading goals, as I did at the end of the last TBR video, in terms of my physical TBR, my goal is to read 50% of my books for my physical TBR. Only 2 of them came from this month. So 2 out of 9 is not 50% by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't end up reading any nonfiction this month, but I am going to be listening to some throughout the next month, so I don't feel too badly about that. In terms of ongoing series, I continued on with the Dresden Files and continued on with Long Price Quartet, both of which will be finishing up very soon. And unfortunately, didn't get to read any classics or literary fiction this month. So hopefully I can be a little bit better in terms of my goals next month. Otherwise, throughout the month, I have still been watching lots of things. I actually have been rewatching Haikyuu. So I watched Haikyuu, which for anyone who doesn't know is a volleyball anime, last year and blasted through it. And I wanted to watch something. And I have so many things I need to watch. It's books that I own. I own so many books, and yet I will buy more and read them. There's so many things that I want to watch, and yet for the second time in less than a year, I am rewatching Haikyuu. So I think I have to come to terms with the fact that I, in fact, like sports anime. I had always said that I don't really like it, but that's clearly not true. So my plea to anyone who has made it this far in the video is that if you have any sports anime that you love, I have watched and really loved Yuri on Ice. That's one of my favorites. Clearly, I really love Haikyuu. And when I was sick with the stomach flu last month, I binge watched Skate the Infinity, which was ridiculous, but in an entertaining way. So if anybody has any favorites other than those, I would love to get some recommendations because I clearly just have to embrace this part of my personality. I do enjoy a good sports anime. So please let me know. That's it. That is my February wrap up. I would love to hear what your favorite books were that you read in February. How much reading did you get done? Hopefully you are pleased with what happened, and I will see you with another video soon. Bye.